I'm just going to leave that comment on screen because, as you can probably work out which one of the quartet has let us down timing-wise tonight, you can probably guess by Rob's comment. Good evening and welcome to your Sunday fix of the Green and White podcast, brought to you by Argyle Life. And there were wilder things happening at that funny little amphitheatre in southwest Devon. I don't know what it is about Home Park, but the old lady has delivered once again, 12 months on to the exact date that Plymouth Argyle last beat a team bound for the Premier League. Sheffield United, off the back of 2 defeats in a week, came into town, and they weren't just left with bloody noses, they were left with some broken hearts. As a late fight back led by Ryan Hardy's tap-in, you could say, after Joe Edwards' acrobatics, gave Argyle a glimmer of hope before Mohamed Tijani, after some brilliant work by Barley Mumba to put in one of the best crosses from the left wing we've perhaps seen all season, led to a chance for TJ to slot it home. And I have never heard noise like it since probably last season when we beat Leicester City on their route towards the Premier League. You are very welcome to tonight's episode. Joining me are Adam, Sam and Dan. If you do see my gaze fixed towards the left of the screen tonight, I am watching the Masters. Let's hope our composure is better than Rory McIlroy's. Sam, why don't you take us through tonight's run through? Plymouth Argyle 2, Sheffield United 1, away you go.
Yeah, certainly a much more enjoyable run through than the one I did on Thursday night, where I've painstakingly described some pretty amateurish errors for about 6 or 7 big chances Swansea had. This was, if anything, possibly one of our best defensive performances of the season. I was going to say one of our best defensive performances of the Muslic era, but Rooney didn't do good defensive performances, so that's essentially one and the same thing. We restricted Sheffield United to quite minimal chances. I did read in the stats that's the one of the lowest XGs we've had recorded against us all season, second only to, I think, Oxford home, which was just a very drab game in which neither team had many XG at all. But that's really encouraging that we restricted them to so few chances. I won't lie, maybe this will get me a bit of stick in the comments, but I thought the first 60, 65 minutes of the game were pretty boring to watch. I think I texted my mum and dad saying I think I might actually fall asleep. May have been a text I sent during that game. I thought my dad will pop up in the comments and hit that one back at me if I don't, own up to it myself. So I'll say that one. But I suppose you could argue that was just us keeping it tight, staying in the game, so we could pounce on them in the final third of the game. And that is, to be fair, what we did do. Like I said, I think it was an elite level defensive performance. Sheffield United's goal was probably the only bad mistake we made defensively all half, and they punished us for it. Paulson missed a header, and then Ogbeta, who I think had a really good 45 minutes up to then, left Raksaki in. I think I said at the time he left him in all the space in Plymouth. Perhaps that's a little bit harsh, but he left him in a bit. Left Raksaki in a bit too much space. Still a tough strike for him though, angled strike, and he curls it into the top corner of the net, and we go in behind, thinking our season is all but over. And the lad who sits across from me, as I walked down to halftime for the toilet, said, "What do you reckon, Sam?" And I said, "Well, I think it's gonna need a miracle." And miracle it was. Like I say, we came out, after the second half, like the first 15, 20 minutes of the half were a non-event. Really, they didn't really have many chances. We had maybe one decent chance within that time, which was the free kick. Was it Edwards' header that then rebounded to Hardy, who hit the bar? Obviously, him hitting the bar was quite a long-range speculative strike, but the initial header from the set piece was a decent effort. We did have 2 penalty appeals in the game.
Sam, just very quickly, is it possible for it to be long range when it's inside the box?
Mid-range, fair enough. No, I'll give you that one, mid-range. Yeah, we did have 2 penalty appeals in the game. Watching them in real time, I said both of them, the referee got right. I said both of them are not penalties. Watching them back, I stand by the second half one. I think that's a really good challenge. The first half one, I totally retract. That's a penalty. He wrestles him into the box.
Don't steal my thunder, Sam. Don't steal my thunder.
I'll put a pin in that, then we'll come back to it. But I think we should have had a penalty first half. We maybe could have had a penalty second half. I think it's a very good challenge. And then eventually we were better with Edwards on the pitch, but ultimately, like I say, the rest of the team still didn't really show up until about the 65th, 70th minute mark. The player who, as a sub, changed the game more than any other was Mohamed Tijani, which I never, after his interesting cameo, shall we say, at Luton away, and that what was the other absolute stinker he had as a cameo? Watford away, of course. In those two, I didn't think that he would probably see much more action at all. But not only did he come on, he came on and completely changed the game. He was an absolute wrecking ball for the Sheffield United defenders. He pretty much won every header he competed for. I think bar maybe one. Really helped bring the ball at the pitch. Maybe didn't have that many passes or whatever to Argyle players, but just from being that battering ram, we were able to compete for the second ball and the third ball, which really helped us gain territory up the pitch, helped us then get the ball to the feet of our more attacking players. And that is exactly what Miron Muslic wants with number 9 in his system, isn't it? He doesn't want the number 9 to play, in perhaps a more, and this isn't a dig, but perhaps a more, who is a pretty football team. You'd want your attacking midfielders to be doing the build-up and maybe the number 9 to be running into the box. In a much more direct team as we are, you want the number 9 to be a bit more back to goal, a bit more of a battering ram, and then, sort of like Ryan Taylor was for Eric Adams, and then you have the more skillful players, if you like, the equivalent of the Carey and Lemire is, who in this instance was Hardy and I guess the wing backs Edwards and Mumba coming in, and that's what did happen. Obviously, the first goal is again another set piece, audacious overhead kick attempt from Edwards. I think he was trying to score with it. He didn't score with it, but the fact that he even had that idea to do it was very good, because it then gets it to the feet of Ryan Hardy, who's got a tap in. And you know what? At that time, I was obviously happy we scored. I was also quite nervous because I was thinking, please don't, do what we did at Watford and just be happy with the draw and waste time and slow the game down like we did at Watford, because that made me really annoyed at Watford. But within 2-3 minutes of the restart, I texted the group chat and I said, you know what, fair play. We're not doing a Watford. We're going for it. Even if we don't get the win, we're going for it now. And obviously then, we did find the win. And I want to give a little bit of credit to Bally Mumba for an absolutely exceptionally created goal that deserved an assist. Obviously won't have an assist to his name because naturally it got crossed in and the defender headed it out and then it goes to TJ, but he picked up that ball inside his own half, and I think it's back to goal, or certainly side on to goal. He sort of pirouetted around, belted it past the fullback for Sheffield United, gets the length of the pitch very quickly, very skillfully, and delivers a lovely, delightfully wafted cross into the box that the defender can't deal with. Falls to TJ, hits it very sweetly on the volley, at half volley. I did wonder if Cooper could have done better with it. It was my first instinct, but actually seeing it again, I think that's maybe a little harsh for me. It's a very good strike, and it's I think when whilst obviously I think the ball was maybe rising slightly, it wasn't. It was lower than I first thought it was. So yeah, very good finish. And then at that point of time, I think we could have even, again, at the end of the game, I think Sheffield United were really pushing forward and we were hitting them on the counter. And if anything, we looked more likely we could even have got a third. I mean, Hardy had the moment where he could have squared it to Edwards and didn't. Beg your pardon. He did try and waft it to Edwards, but should have shot, which is ironically the opposite of what he did in the Norwich game, where he perhaps should have shot and didn't. Oh, the other way around. I'm getting myself tongue tied, but you get the gist of what I'm saying, I'm sure. Comment coming up. Miron invited Mumba to take it down the line, absolutely, and that clearly works. So yeah, I think, like I say, I'm not going to pretend it was massively fun to watch for most of it, but you could argue that gave us the platform to push on. The subs definitely changed the game without a shadow of a doubt. One of them, I think you can maybe argue, should have been starting in the first place, but with TJ, he was an inspired impact sub. He came on and just completely, bulldozed the Sheffield United defence, bulldozed the tired legs. They had one big chance after we scored, which was a counter-attack, getting quite open, quite end-to-end. where I think Houghton, lost the ball in midfield, breaks away. Such maybe a little loose on his man who fires it. I think it was Campbell who fires it into the side netting. That was their biggest chance of the game. Like I said, their goal wasn't really what I would call a good chance. It was a very well taken finish. But that was probably their biggest chance of the game that they had, I would say. We restricted them to very little. Like I say, elite defensive performance. And whilst there wasn't much of the game that I think we were dominant in, we made the dominant spell count as we so often do at home park, in particular when the atmosphere is up, the atmosphere is behind us. That 20-minute spell, we really blew Sheffield United away, and 2 very well taken goals. And what is it with this team? How are we still in this? How the hell are we still in this? It's absolutely incredible. From where we are, where we've been, and in a way, I'm just annoyed more so now at Swansea, because if we'd have won at Swansea, this would be so on now. We'd now be on level points, wouldn't we, going into the Easter weekend? And I'm seeing a few comments saying Houghton did lost the ball, but it was a bad pass. And Randall, maybe one of those, it's a bit 6 to 1, half a dozen the other. I think Houghton didn't still have a chance to get control on it. But yeah, fair enough. Maybe both of them to blame. But yeah, anyway, that's my assessment. Another win, deserved win, I think, over the balance of it. Despite how, like I say, dull a lot of it was an efficient winning performance. So can't really argue with that. And on we go to Good Friday, where we've got to go to Middlesbrough and back it up.
We absolutely have, and impeccably timed, Sam, because it seems like Pat's stream is ahead of mine, and Rory's putt was sunk just as you finished talking. Less of the golf. Adam, we touched upon, if we go back 2 years ago to when we won League One under Steven Schumacher, we touched on many a podcast after those games that there was just a 15-20 minute period where we were not unbeatable, because I think that's the wrong term, because in that 15-minute spell yesterday, Tyrese Campbell obviously had a wonderful opportunity that Chris Wilder's right, he should have probably scored from. But for 15-20 minutes yesterday, not only did we look like a championship team, we looked like a championship team that were really going to hurt our opponents, didn't we?
We did, and as you say, it's a pattern. It's something we've seen regularly since Muslic has been here, where we'll just have that period of time where we find ourselves on top, we find ourselves creating chances, and invariably at the moment, we find ourselves scoring goals in that time. And there's that 15-minute period yesterday. Of course, I think you can argue, to be honest, that there's 15-minute periods as much as they came either side of half-time against Derby and Portsmouth as well, where we scored late on in the first half, early on in the second, where we're getting our momentum to carry on over the break. Obvious example being West Brom, when we went 1-0 down with 15 minutes to play, and then got a couple of goals. And you can look as well at the Norwich and the Millwall games as well. Millwall was an example of where we started quickly and got a couple in the first 15 minutes, and then we kind of dominated the game. It kind of makes you think, if we were the sort of team to have more dominant spells, have the sort of time where we're putting a few 15-minute periods together, how good could we be? And hey, maybe we'd see a few of those Millwall games a little more often, where we really hit teams for 6, not hit them for 5, as it was on that occasion. But hey, it's to come. So I like seeing it, of course, and those moments where we are on top, as we were briefly yesterday, as we were in numerous games gone by, where we've just managed to not just score, but score a couple of goals, which is a really nice trait to have. I guess the only fear then is, okay, we're making the most of it now. What if it dries up? What if we get some times where we're on top and we're not taking those chances, and then we realise actually we're not on top enough at all? I guess that's where your Swanseas come in. That's where you're looking at games like Burnley at home, when we don't have that spell and just get a bit demolished at the end. Now, I'm not going to totally disagree with Sam on this, by the way, because I do totally buy that the first 65 minutes of that game yesterday were dire, and then that being the main event on Sky, it must have been awful for the neutral going through that 65 minutes. I actually thought the first half itself was a crime against the sport, which, to be fair, is much more on Wilder's hands than it is. That is Muslic. Muslic is having to deal with the hand that he's been dealt. Wilder has an abundance of talent in his ranks and has decided to play the first half like that, which shows the man's limitations, I guess. And going into the second half, when he's decided, we're going to try and keep hold of this 1-0 lead away to the bottom of the league rather than kill the game off and waste as much time. And it's lovely to see them get the comeuppance, isn't it? It wasn't the most exciting game for a while. But that 15 minutes, I defy anyone of an Argyle persuasion to say that they could sit through that 15 minutes and not be hugely entertained by what they saw. And if we get that a little more often, maybe it will be in a lower tier next season when you'd expect us to have those periods more often. Hey, we should be entertained. There'll be boring spells, of course there will, if teams try and park the bus against us. But from what we're seeing from these moments where we switch on, it's great to watch. It really is.
I'd be really interested to know, and I agree with what both you say. And I thought the first hour of that game yesterday, well, but up until there was obviously the little moment in the first half between Jezra and Raksaki and Julio Pleguezuelo that seemed to get the crowd going, and there was a little moment in the second half in particular as well that I seem to remember the crowd getting really into the game. It really was a lifeless hour of Championship football, easily forgettable. But Dan, there was one bit of quality in that first half, owing to our mistakes in the build-up. But we've been coming up against Raksaki now for nearly 3 seasons. First of all, with Charlton, we saw his ability with Crystal Palace in the League Cup last season. It escapes me where he was on loan last season. Somebody will be able to tell me, I'm sure. But he's a quality player, isn't he? And if he was able to put those sorts of moments of brilliance more consistently, he would certainly be worth his weight in gold every week in the team for Sheffield United.
I think he would. Whether he'll be able to make the step up to the Premier League with them will be interesting to see, if indeed they do go up, because that's looking far from certain at this moment in time. It was a brilliant finish, wasn't it? I think something Sam said in his summary about Ogbeta, I think I wouldn't quite go with that. I think with the position that we were in when that ball goes towards Powson's head, Pleguezuelo's higher up, Powson's gone across to make the header, and Suture's shuffled as well, meaning that Ogbeta's kind of got to go across. He can't leave a gaping big gap between left centre half and himself, so he's got to shuffle across. The ball comes out to Raksaki and Ogbeta gets there. The mistake he then makes, in my opinion, was letting him cut inside too easily. Know how dangerous he is on his left foot. He proved it, smashed it into the corner, no chance for Hazard. It's a wonderful finish, but I think that's the mistake Ogbeta made. And it was a frustrating one for us, because I think especially because the nature that Sheffield United are, especially under Chris Wilder, is that they go 1-0 up and they kill games. They're not like a Leeds that will, smash you out of sight or be free flowing and score loads of goals and be really attacking and put the game to bed. They'll just go 1-0 up and sit on it and just stifle us. So I think a lot of, the rest of the game was kind of reflective of that. But it's just such a relief, as Sam said. We managed to get that 15-minute spell, get on top, get some momentum, and then once we equalised, it was fascinating, really, wasn't it? In that both teams, a point was just no good to either side. Sheffield United really needed to go for the win. We absolutely did as well. And as a result, you sense that there would be a third goal in it, and thankfully it's gone our way, and we're just about there, keeping us kind of on the edge of our seat, aren't they? Just about in the fight still.
Just on
They
that,
certainly are.
can I just make a really quick point on this? It kind of links it all together. I absolutely agree. The way that it was yesterday at the end of the game, when you realise a point didn't really suit anybody and they're both pushing, it was great to see. That just makes Watford and the way we performed and decided to settle there feel even stranger, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Why did we sit on that Why was Hazard time wasting? I mean, I assume Muslic was telling him to time waste, but why on earth were we time wasting at 0-0? And people will look at, if we do go down by a couple of points, I think people will look at various things, and obviously will be various reasons why we went down and didn't have enough to stay up. But that's a big moment for me. The fact that game was very, very winnable, and we didn't push on from it. Maybe it could have been like the Derby game where we pushed on and we lost 1-0, but I think it was worth the gamble for sure, as was the Derby game, as was yesterday. And thankfully yesterday, unlike those two, came out on top.
Yeah, absolutely. And huge thank you to already the near 700 people who are tuning in to tonight's episode. Your support is greatly appreciated. Keep sending the comments in and as many questions as you can. We will get to it towards the back end of the hour. We do have an interesting Easter preview coming up. I'm going to try and pose the questions to the guys about both games, but obviously the Coventry preview will be slightly more limited than the Middlesbrough preview because it will often depend on what happens on Friday with various variants. Let's go around the group then and get our player focus points out of the way. Sam, let's come to you first. I think it's safe to say that whilst we're told that there are many leaders on the pitch, one above all else and one who will forever go down in Argyle folklore stood up more than any other yesterday, from even as simple as waving his arms around at the crowd when he finished sprinting on from the touchline.
Yeah, absolutely. My player is obviously Joe Edwards. I think firstly, just looking at what he did purely in the sense of a football point of view, he really had a positive impact, a good half. He made a couple of nice balls down the line. He assisted Hardy's goal. He was just generally quite well involved, provided the overlap, did his job defensively as well. He is the absolute epitome of a player who can just raise his game to the absolute maximum possible level of his ability. Is he the quickest? Is he the most skillful? No, but he really drags 100% performance out of himself every time he plays. And that was a perfect example of it. As much as Sorinola has had a decent enough season, that to me says why we probably should have, and I know examples now, when didn't we wish him well? That to me says why we probably should have made a change, if possible, a little bit earlier than what we did in terms of our right wing back, because I think we had so much more in the attacking sense, particularly when we're at the point now where we need wins, like the draws aren't good enough. We had so much more in the attacking sense from the old faithful duo, if you like, of Edwards and Mumba on either side. I know that Miron has been up to now very resistant to playing a right footer on the left side, but I think now he's done so. I think he'll agree and recognise that was the right thing to do. Obviously, with that, Edwards, I think it's definitely offered more going forward than Sorinola. He gets in the box, he provides a threat, and it is, as Joe said as well, not just what he does in terms of interactions with the ball, defending, attacking. It is those little intangibles, like waving his arms up to the crowd, getting the mood going. Even when he ran over and had a little. Oh, I'm hearing myself in feedback there. If anyone's not on mute, please be on mute. There we go. That's done it. He even ran over and had a little set to with Cooper, didn't he? He was giving him a little nudge in the ribs, which Cooper didn't seem to take very nicely to. Whether that's just the heat of the moment on the field, or whether there was some kind of underlying tension, maybe from the manner in which he left Argyle, who knows? Maybe it was just a bit of nothing on the field, and they shook hands after. I genuinely don't know, but he didn't seem to react very well to what Edwards did to him. That I think got the blood up of the crowd a little bit, like as superintendent there is saying in the comments, he was maybe berating the ref a little bit as well. And I think he just got built that hostile atmosphere. And look, I wasn't a huge fan of some of the booing and jeering towards Cooper in particular. I do think he is an absolute pillar of the past few years. And I was actually quite happy when he got a good reception at the start of the second half. But you know what? In the context of making it a generally hostile atmosphere for all the opponents, in that wider context, I kind of get it ultimately to some extent, because I do think it made it more and more of an overwhelming place for Sheffield United to be. That's that. Maybe we'll go on a little bit more on the Sheffield United and their conduct at the end of the game later in the show. But I think Joe Edwards' mannerisms, the way he was, the way he led, contributed to their falling apart in that sense. I'll just very briefly, if I may, take a minute or so more before I pass on to the next person. It would be remiss of talking about Joe Edwards to not mention the Dan Scarr, shall we say, rather unusual intervention after the game, where Miron Muslic quote tweeted that.
I'm coming to that. Sam, I'm coming to that later. Don't worry.
Okay.
You'll get.
Okay. Well, in that case, then I will yield my position, and that's my take on Joe Edwards. Thank you very much.
You'll get your moment. Don't worry about that. Dan, this is probably going to surprise a few. That it's not Adam going to talk about this particular player. Why don't you talk about one of our 3 centre backs in yesterday's game?
Well, I will do, but I just want to jump on something Sam said about the reluctance to play a right footer at left wing back. I thought it was kind of quite ironic, and fair play to Mumba in that I've been a bit critical of him for being a bit one-footed before and not having that strong a left foot. That ball in for what eventually was the winning goal with his left foot was absolutely superb, and I think that's the kind of quality of cross from the left that we haven't seen often enough from Puhac when he's played, certainly not from Ogbeta either. So I thought that was kind of quite ironic that our right-footed left wing back put in that brilliant cross with his left. Fair play to him. My player of choice is Victor Paulsen, and I'm going to go pretty against the grain, I think, here. I saw a lot of comments about, what a brilliant performance he put in yesterday. And don't get me wrong, he did a lot of good stuff. I'm not going to dispute that. But similarly, in that I went against the grain earlier in the season, where he got a hell of a lot of stick from our fans, comments that he was the worst player of all time relative to level, etc., which I thought was just totally blown out of proportion. Don't get me wrong, he was not playing well, as were a lot of our players. But I think there were players in the squad that were doing worse, namely Ogbeta, Forshaw, Obafemi. And similarly, he was being played as an attacking right back. He's 33, he's slow, and Rooney was playing him at, attacking right back. No wonder he's going to look bad. If we played Mustafa Bundu at centre back, he'd look terrible. You have to kind of cut him some slack in that respect. So now that he's playing in a position that he's suited to in the back three, and we've got a manager that relatively knows what he's doing, certainly more than the previous one. He's starting to show that he's a decent player at this level. Not great, I wouldn't say, but decent. It was an interesting one yesterday, though, because, like I say, a lot of praise for him and fair play. He deserves that, but he did make 3 really big errors in the game, one of which cost us a goal. I think if the others had cost us goals as well, the narrative would be quite different. But obviously, the header out to which fell to a Sheffield United attacker, which led to them playing out to Raksaki for the goal. He should have just headed that out of play, right touchline, or at least kind of further towards. I think it was Pleggy who was out there. So that's an error, undoubtedly. Then second half, Sheffield United have a corner. He's kind of zonally marking at the near post and just misses his header, just gets underneath it. I know Pleggy was there as well to kind of put their player off, but he should be able to deal with it and shouldn't miss the ball, basically. He did, and luckily they headed it straight at Hazard. No goal from that. The biggest one for me, the biggest error was, I think, that chance Sam referred to. I think it was at 1-1, actually. When Sheffield United are breaking, Such is at left centre-back, and they're kind of breaking down that kind of right channel towards Such. And they have got 2 players, but they're still quite far back. Paulsen should, for me, be totally just so much more aware of the Sheffield United player who is on the left wing in so much space. He leaves him alone and drifts towards Such as if to kind of double up against those players that are still quite far away. And that's just a real lack of awareness for me. It was, he's got to see that, their player is in all that kind of space and get across to him as quickly as he can. Very fortunately, it's a really kind of poor lack of composure finish into the side netting. And we really got away with one there, it could have cost us. So it was a strange performance, really, because he did do a lot of good, but made 3 really big errors. So some things to work on for sure. But as a more general point about his performances, I think he's played. He's been far from our worst player maybe not far from our worst, but he's not been our worst player this season. He's done a solid job, especially at centre back, centre back, as opposed to left or right centre back. And who knows in terms of next season whether we're Championship, League One, will he still do a job as a middle centre back? Obviously, he's not quick, but I think there's a decent level player in there, and he's also very committed to the cause, and we need a hell of a lot of that over the last 4 games. So not sure what the situation will be in terms of injuries defensively. Will we need to see him starting more? Maybe it'll be back to the bench, but if he does start, I wouldn't be too disappointed because I think he can certainly do a job for us.
I don't know what's more painful here, watching Argyle try and hold on to a lead, or now trying to watch Rory McIlroy hold on to a lead. Adam, if Sam talks about game changers and difference makers off the bench in the shape of Joe Edwards, one man came off the bench yesterday and made a huge impact. Essentially with his first touch of the ball, just winning one of those aerial headers that we look so devoid of doing throughout the day. Just touch on our winning goal scorer's impact on yesterday's game.
Yeah, it's going to be a while on Tijani for me. I didn't fight too hard, by the way, to talk about my favourite Icelandic centre-back. I think it'd probably be tantamount to stalking if I spend any more minutes talking about Victor Palsson. So thank you, Dan, for taking that one off my hands. But yes, the Tijani factor, it was, as we mentioned, huge and immediate as well. He's come on in the 64th minute, and in the 64th minute, Harry Clark has picked up a yellow card for a foul after he'd been beaten by Tijani, and that set the tone for a lot of what he did. I mean, it was you put added time in there. It's about a 30-minute cameo, and the impact he's got. I know he got Sky's man of the match, and I don't disagree with that. I think the impact that he had was so phenomenal in that half-hour spell that he's earned all the plaudits coming his way. And a couple of things to mention with what we've seen with the numbers. As you mentioned, it's the fact that he's immediately won an aerial duel, and it's got us on the front foot. He competed in 5 aerial duels in that game and won all 5 in a half-hour spell. Remarkable, actually, for someone just coming into the game, particularly against such an experienced Championship level and beyond defence. He has put them to the sword straight away, and given Argyle a new option for going forward. Not that we weren't long ball anyway. Of course we were. We usually are under Muslic, but those long balls having that outlet, that target, and getting down, and of course importantly picking up those second balls as well, which really sent us forward. And then of course is the moment of his goal, and it's another brilliant finish. It really is. He's only scored twice for us this season for a lot of mitigating factors. Obviously, he's not had a lot of time to make an impact with his injuries, but both of those goals have been excellent first time finishes. The one against Cardiff, where it's kind of flicked on by Bundu coming out of the air, and he just sweeps it past the keeper with the first touch, is excellent. And do you know what? Yesterday's, I think, is even better. The amount of time that ball actually spends airborne as we're waiting for it to come down. He catches it so sweetly and gets it past a very, very good goalkeeper for this level into the net, which has earned us the victory and earned him an award, and an award he fully deserves. And now I guess you're in a situation now of, what do you do with him now? Do you go, I think he's out to start now. I think we play him from the start against Borough and against Coventry and beyond, if he's fit, of course. And I'm not against that argument at all, by the way. I think he's certainly earned a start, if you want to put it like that. My fear is, if we do start him, well, there's a couple of fears. One, obviously, the longer he spends on the field, the more likely he is to get injured. I know he's been very injury prone for much of the campaign. But second, and I think more importantly, do we want to lose that impact that Tijani offers as a substitute against tiring legs in these defences, giving them something else to think about later on in the game. Now, I think back, I'm going to take us back to summer and the Euros, as I often seem to find myself doing. But the game in Dortmund when Ollie Watkins scored the last-minute winner off the bench, Gareth Southgate got a lot of criticism for his substitutes in that tournament. And to be fair, a lot of it was with merit. But he waited a while to bring Watkins on there. And there's, of course, we will never know, but had he brought him on a bit earlier, would his legs been a little less fresh? Is he definitely going to finish it like that? We'll never know for sure. But that differential is there. And we've got De Ligt, who's played the full 90 on and is tiring and not particularly ready to go to extra time. And Watkins, who's very recently come on, running towards him, putting him under pressure. That differential there matters. And I think it's been the same for Tijani throughout much of what we've been able to see from him this season. I look at, I can't remember, and I apologise for who sent in the comment, but there was one comment I saw that says Tijani scored more goals this season than he's had starts. And it's true. He's started one game for us in the league and he scored twice, both of them off the bench. He is kind of that player who can have an impact as a substitute or as a game changer, as Muslic will put it, that few can. And I don't know, I don't want to lose that ability. I don't want to have Argyle lose the ability to bring Tijani off the bench with half an hour to go and give these defences something to think about. Because if I've been playing for an hour and I've got Mohamed Tijani running at me, and I don't care how good I am, I'm running scared at that point. Because the physicality is something that I know I'm much less likely to match. Don't get me wrong. If he's in the starting lineup, we play Hardy and Bundu off of Tijani up at Middlesbrough, I'm not going to be offended. You know, he's very much earned to start, and it'll be interesting to see how he can do with what will ultimately just be his second start of the campaign. But I think if keeping him on the bench and bringing him on for half an hour gives us more performances like we had yesterday, which was incredibly good, then I think we've got to look at doing that more often.
Was it Sam? You'll remember exactly, but was it Paul Sturrock said once about Ian Stonebridge when he kept putting in good performances off the bench? Something like he was asked whether Stonebridge would now be starting, and he said, "Well, why would I do that? He keeps doing so well off the bench. Why would I change it?"
Yeah, that was exactly it. Yeah, and yeah, I think that's one thing that that Muslic is very keen to emphasise. Similarly to how Schumacher was in the title season about starters and closers. The people who start are important, but the people who close the game out are also very important. And yeah, absolutely. I think like that. I think you can probably, out of the two big game changers, if you like, who came on, I think that one of them, you know, we don't know Edwards' fitness. That notwithstanding, I mean, Muslic said that Edwards was fuming for that he didn't start. So clearly, he at least feels he was match fit. Whether he actually wasn't, I don't know. I thought that subject to fitness, Edwards just probably should have been starting. And I think, given what Muslic said, he almost as good as said he's going to start on Friday. So I think he would probably now go with that as well. Tijani, I think is a little different. I don't think Tijani is the case that he sorry, I'm just chuckling away at one of the comments there. Thank you very much for that. I mean, Tijani isn't necessarily one that should have started, and you know, we were just correcting the error. I think with him, it was very much a case that the impact he'll have as an impact sub is possibly far greater than we'd have starting. Is that to say I'd never start him? No, we do ultimately have 3 games in 8 games: Good Friday, Easter Monday, and Preston away. I think he's certainly earned the possibility of starting one of those. But I do think away to Middlesbrough, they are a team who play perhaps quite similarly to Norwich in the sense that they overplay a little bit and we can really hit them on the counter. They're the teams who've generally done well against in the Muslic era. I think in that regard, you want your pacey counter-attackers. So I think Bundu through the middle. He's by and large done a decent job as a central striker. I'm not going to say he's done great. We are bottom of the league after all, but we're not doing that well. But I think he's been a decent enough player as a central striker. I think Obafemi, we know how he can have a burst of pace, and obviously, of course, the player you most associate with pace, Ryan Hardy. So I think that's the front 3 I'd probably play at Middlesbrough. Whether I would then maybe shake it up a bit, play Tijani at home to Coventry or even away at Preston, quite possibly. For the next game, I would still say keep him where he's best, which is as in impact sub, yeah. And it's kind of mad to think Johnny's only had that one start for the club, which was Sheffield Wednesday, that debacle on the opening day. And that's the only start he's had all this time on, given that we paid quite a hefty loan fee for him and have a very large option to buy, which I'm sure we will not be taking up, whether we make a lower offer, possibly. But I remember at the time it was reported the option to buy at that time would have made him our record signing, which would have been more than the 1 million we played for Whittaker and Mumba. So I'm certainly not inclined to pay 1.2 million for him, but never know. Maybe if we stay in the league, we might come in with a lower offer and see what Slavia Prague say.
Yeah, well, that's about 3 hours on Mohamed Tajani. Who thought that's where tonight's episode was going to go if you'd said it to us before kickoff yesterday afternoon? I'm just going to give a little honourable mention, if you like, to somebody who perhaps has been a little bit of a whipping boy on podcasts and online in recent weeks. And to some extent, you can justify that because, as we've often said, there have been a number of performances that have really been glaringly obvious that he's not up to the level. But just want to talk, while we're talking about the impact of people off the bench, I want to talk about the impact of Darko JB off the bench yesterday afternoon, who didn't come on as one of the central midfielders yesterday, came on to play wide right, essentially where Callum Wright had been playing all afternoon. And what impressed me yesterday about Darko JB when he came on that right-hand side was just his composure towards the end of the game. When he got on the ball and he was driving us forward, we always go back when we talk about Darko JB's good performances to Middlesbrough away last year when he was played in a more attacking sense and he was the driving force to get us further up the field and ultimately got his goal on that afternoon. But it's a little bit of an interesting one, isn't it? Because he's been played wide in a front three here, and every time he got on the ball, he showed a level of composure I don't think we've seen from him all season. Now, I don't know what his instructions were, but every time he went down that right-hand side, Joe Edwards was metaphorically holding his hand going down that right wing. They were going as a pair, and it was fantastic game management from the pair of them in those final few minutes, in particular in stoppage time. And I just think, whilst, we've all been quick to call out Darko JB in recent weeks, when he does have an impact like he had yesterday, don't get me wrong, I was a little bit hesitant when I saw he was coming off the bench towards the end of the game. But when he does have an impact, I do think that we should be fair and call him out for that as well. So fair play to him. I think we all know the statistics that when Randall and Houghton play together, we spoke about it last week on the podcast. We just keep going back to Randall and Houghton and it works. I don't know why we keep messing with that combination whilst both players are fit and able. And Jordan Houghton, there was a comment a little bit earlier on. Jordan Houghton had another brilliant game yesterday, I thought. And the reason Jordan Houghton's had a brilliant game is because you don't talk about a Jordan Houghton mistake. You just don't recognise Jordan Houghton in the game. And I think if that's the case, then he's probably had a good game. Let's quickly take on Passotti's man of the match poll. And interestingly, the one player they've gone with unanimously, none of us four have mentioned, and overwhelmingly the winner, 227 votes in the poll yesterday, and 49.8% of the vote all going the way of Julio Pleguezuelo, who, whilst we're going to touch on him, I thought he dealt with Jezra and Raksaki incredibly well at times yesterday when he was sold a little bit short, perhaps, by his left fullback. There's also 21% of the vote to Bali Mumba, who did get a little bit of a mention, 9% for Victor Poulsen. There was also 9% for Mohamed Tajani, 10 votes for Joe Edwards, 8 votes for Ryan Hardy in there. Before we take it away from yesterday's game and talk about the full-time antics, I do feel like it's remiss of me, and I did tell Sam to put a pin in this topic a little bit earlier on, the performance of Oliver Langford, the referee, yesterday. If you'll allow me 90 seconds of your evening. One of the reasons that game was so boring yesterday was the fact that any time somebody got within 2 inches of another player on the pitch, they were going to ground and the referee was giving a free kick, really did not help with the afternoon's flow whatsoever. And that's on both sides as well. I can understand Sheffield United fans not being happy with the referee's performance because some of the free kicks we were getting were just glaringly obvious not free kicks. And then in steps in that first half, as we've all seen, what's probably even a red card in rugby these days, where Robinson locks one arm around Mustafa Bundu's neck, one arm under his armpit and around his chest. I thought at the time that it was very soft, and I do think Bundu is probably going to ground when he feels the contact. However, you cannot lock your arm around a player's neck. It's just a no-go. Now, the contact probably happens outside the box, therefore meaning it probably isn't a penalty and it's a free kick. However, he is impeding Mustafa Bundu's opportunity to bring that football down out of the air. And let's not forget, his actions in bringing Mustafa Bundu down to the floor are also putting his own goalkeeper in risk, because Michael Cooper then ends up having to go over both of them whilst being felled essentially by the bodies hitting the ground. I think, Sam, you're spot on with that tackle in the second half. I think it's probably the best tackle you'll see up and down the country all weekend yesterday by, I think it was Vinicius Souza, wasn't it, who actually done himself a mischief in that tackle, and that was the end of his game. And then, of course, we had the incident where he was off the pitch, so he would have been off for 30 seconds, and Sheffield United did all they can to delay the taking of the corner so they could get Hamza Chowdhury on the pitch, and that seemed to really incense Argyle, that whilst they should have had a disadvantage at the set piece, they were then going to get 11 men on to defend it. But I just wanted to touch on that a little bit, that it was such an indifferent refereeing performance yesterday. And I don't think any of us can offer any complaints that Bundu was fouled. Really, Sam, did you have anything else you wanted to say on that incident?
Just tangentially to that, yeah, Sheffield United's time wasting went away for a team going for promotion to the Premier League, going away from home to a team that's been the weakest team in the league for pretty much all the season is absolutely embarrassing, I've got to say. Genuinely, like 4 or 5 of their players went down throughout the game with long stoppages. One of them being Mike Cooper, and I did sort of say to myself, out on the Barbican last night, yeah, well, we loved it when he did that for us. We loved it when he was a bit of a SHIT house, winding up opposition fans, etc., going down, having a stoppage. We loved it when he did that for us. And whilst, we did, we were always underdogs. Even when we won the league, we had a mid-table budget. Sheffield United, they have got one of the biggest budgets in the league, one of the best squads in the league, and they came down to Plymouth Argyle, who, as much as we have improved a bit in recent weeks, have been of 24 for a reason. And rather than actually going for the game and trying to beat us, 2 or 3-0, he instructed his team to sort of lie down and waste time and feign injury, like he was, the manager of Torquay United playing away to Liverpool. It was a joke the way they approached the game. And I've got to say, though, after his maybe it's a nice little segue, Joe, into the next section, after his comments in midweek that Miron Muslic was talking a load of rubbish and that actually he knew very well how to handle pressure. I think the way to prove how to handle pressure is definitely give your team a rollicking and finger point at them in the middle of the pit field at full time, and then go over and start on 2 of our players and start a ruckus in the tunnel. That's a great way to show you're not wilting under the pressure, Chris, isn't it?
Yeah, you've segued it perfectly into our next talking point, Sam, and that is Christopher Wilder, who divides opinion, I think, up and down the country anyway, before this weekend. And we have to just say this before we go any further, that he showed an immense amount of respect and class up at Bramall Lane with Michael Cooper playing against Argyle for the first time, and rightfully we gave him praise on this very podcast for that act. I was somewhat surprised by his comments before the game. Just to jog your memory, they're bottom for a reason. And we understand what we have to do, and that he said he'd heard some nonsense from the manager of Plymouth Argyle talking about pressure, and when he said that there's more pressure on staying in the division than getting out of it. Well, as you allude to, Sam, the pressure was released in one hit yesterday afternoon at full time. I'm sure if you haven't seen already, there is a video circulating on social media where Chris Wilder takes it upon himself to have a little bit of a slanging match with Argyle fans to the left-hand side of the dugout at full time. He then proceeds to go onto the pitch, almost Phil Brown-esque, and issue a rally cry that struck me as, don't let this get to your heads. Everyone stay calm. It's been a bad week, but let's park it. We've got 4 games to achieve our ultimate goal. And then chaos, Adam. I'm not sure whether or how much of it you saw from your vantage point within the ground. I was very lucky where I sit in the stadium. It all unfolded beneath me, but I don't want to hog the limelight. I am only the host. What's your take on the shenanigans? If you didn't see it live in person in the stadium, everybody in the world has seen it since. It's probably all a bit of nothing, where Bundu and Clark have a set to, and then Wilder thinks that Bundu's celebrating in front of his fans, but it's just a consequence of where the tunnel is, isn't it?
Yeah, I think in all of this, it's important to remember that this man's meltdown has actually been absolutely hilarious to watch. It's important we all take a moment to appreciate just how funny this has been. The rantings of a bloke who is definitely not feeling pressure. I'm definitely not under any pressure, and I just wish you'd stop talking about pressure. It has just been remarkable. I mean, the juxtapositions are there for all to see. It's already been mentioned that he spent some time going around and getting his players together and saying, keep your calm. This doesn't define us. We're going to go again. And then within 30 seconds was looking to start some fights with the players who were celebrating as they walked off the pitch. I mean, hey, sorry about where our away end is, Chris, but would you prefer the old grandstand? We can shove you in there if you like. I don't know. Maybe it's getting to him that he's the second best manager in Sheffield at the moment. I don't know, but there's something wrong with the guy here. And in all fairness, it's very easy to be gracious and happy to let your player clap his fans when you've just won 2-0. I think we saw the real side of Chris Wilder yesterday after the game, and there's a reason why he's not particularly well liked. And I will just circle back actually to something that I think, Joe, you've mentioned it before with regards to these kickoff times and the fact that we're the early kickoff and we played late on the Wednesday as well. And hey, maybe Jurgen Klopp had a point. I remember Jurgen Klopp for no reason at all picking a fight with Chris Wilder once. Hey, maybe he had a point there as well. Maybe Jurgen Klopp is even more of a genius than many of us initially thought like he was. So enjoy the playoffs, Chris. We'll all be watching, and don't let the pressure get to you.
I kind of feel like I want to play Joy Division and Blades of Fortune, but we're not going to do that. Because financially it means a little bit to our club if Sheffield United do get promoted with the Michael Cooper transfer. But Dan, there are ways to conduct yourself at full time, and Chris Wilder chose the wrong way yesterday, didn't he? And ultimately, he shrugged it off when he spoke to Jonathan Oates on Sky Sports after the game that it was all heat of the moment, and he's spoken to Miron, he's spoken to Oliver Langford, the referee's assessor, and it was all done in his eyes. I don't imagine the FA are going to take his interview as verbatim, though, are they? I'd suggest they'll be asking for CCTV first thing tomorrow morning.
If they haven't already, yeah. And hopefully he gets his comeuppance, because to be brutally honest, when you got Raksaki scoring and running over to kind of block 5, block 6 and doing the shush thing and all of that stuff to our fans, can you really have a go at Bundu for celebrating at full time when he wasn't exactly pointing his body towards the away end and goading them, was he? He was just celebrating by the away end, which is also where the tunnel is, for goodness sake. So he's just talking utter nonsense. As Adam said, the comments and actions of a man who is feeling the pressure and kind of knows that they're in the process of bottling an automatic promotion by the looks of it. Ironically, given that, a lot's been said about Leeds and their struggles with kind of getting over the line and bottling things, it's Sheffield United this last week, 3 losses in a row, I think now, and since Wilder had a pop at their fans himself after that Oxford loss, it all seems to have kind of gone to pot a bit, hasn't it? Be very, very interesting, but I think it has kind of helped with. It was a good time for us to play them, I'd say, for sure. I think if we played them a couple of weeks ago when they were still kind of all firing, it would have been a tougher assignment. But yeah, looks like they're destined for the playoffs. And you know what? If I was a Coventry or a Middlesbrough or something like that and ended up playing them in the playoffs, I'd fancy it. I'd be up for it.
And I agree with all of what Adam and Dan have both said. I want to add one more thing, which is picking up on a comment that Superintendent put in the comments, which is a great point. One manager who actually has notably goaded an opposition team is, of course, Chris Wilder, because when they beat Sheffield Wednesday in Steel City Derby, he was in a pub, maybe a little worse for drink, singing songs about Danny Roll. So as somebody who actually did derogatory, in a derogatory way, mock and belittle another team's manager in another club, admittedly fine, they've won a derby, whatever. But if you're going to give it out, you should be able to take it as well. And for him to then be in a pub singing songs, taking the mick out of Danny Roll, to then go psycho on two of our players for celebrating a win is rather a double standard, I think.
Absolutely agree. And one thing that I noted when I kept looking back at it earlier on today was that there seemed to be an extreme bias of numbers of Sheffield United to Argyle involved in the ruckus. If you watch it back and just try and clock how many Argyle players are actually in that tunnel area, we are significantly outnumbered. So I'd suggest the FA will be taking a long look at whatever footage is available. And as somebody else has said, if Randall was going to get a 3-game ban for whatever he did, then Chris Wilder's antics probably aren't going to be looked at necessarily too favorably. But that's life, isn't it? And as we say, pressure is a difficult thing to handle, and clearly Chris Wilder is not handling it very well.
And I saw another just finally, what a load of absolute rubbish I saw about the Plymouth squad, weren't rushing in to defend their teammates. Well, what would you rather to do? Rushed in and got a load of bans for ourselves as well, and potentially innocent people, match day staff, stewards, getting caught up in the midst of it and make it 10 times worse. I think that was a ridiculous comment, quite frankly, that I saw. I think being able to calm it down in any situation like that, in a pub, in life, in a sports game, to be able to calm down a situation like that and de-escalate it is actually a skill in itself. And if people are going to have a go at our players for not running in and escalating the situation even more, I think that's a really silly thing to be saying.
Just lastly, Superintendent hits the nail on the head here. If you look at the footage, it looks like JB and Houghton are trying to act as peacemakers in the situation. And other than Bundu, I think they were the only two players representing Argyle in the tunnel at the time of the incident. So it's all very silly, all very unnecessary heat of the moment, but it is done. And hopefully the authorities will take the relevant action. And as you say, Sam, it shows great restraint by the Argyle players, knowing that potentially repercussions will be on the end of it if they're found to be getting unnecessarily involved in handbags, the bigger picture and all that. So fair play to the Argyle boys for hanging back a little bit. But hey, we're not even allowed to celebrate in our own stadium these days. Anything else we want to touch upon on yesterday's game at all before we move it on? Because we do still have one or two little talking points to discuss. Anything else about yesterday's game?
Probably just one really quick thing on Ref Watch, which didn't get covered. I think there was another penalty which was missed. Not that it mattered, because when Ballymumba put that excellent ball in, Bundu gets his shirt pulled back. It's not a blatant one, but at the same time, by the letter of the law, he had his shirt pulled in the box, should have been a penalty. Didn't matter, it fell to Tijani and we scored anyway. But just thought I'd mention that, given that the referee had not a terrible game, but some of those decisions, that rugby tackle on Bundu is absolutely bizarre. So, another one chalked down that he got wrong.
Yeah, and what I will, if I am going to call Oliver Langford out for missing the rugby tackle on Mustafa Bundu, I should thank him that it was only 7 minutes added on at the end of the game. My jaw hit the floor when I saw the number 7 go up. I was expecting much closer to double figures. So thank you for that. Moving it on then, we're at the hour mark. Over 1,000 of you are watching, and Rory McIlroy still leads the Masters. So all is right in the world. Gents, this week, before we move it on to the preview of Middlesbrough and the Easter period and take a look at the 16 questions that I've already got starred here tonight. So we're going to rattle through them. So Sam, best get your quick answers prepped and ready to go. There was an interview put out this week by former director of football Neil Dewsnip on a 2-hour-long podcast, actually discussing his career in football, his life in football, and obviously most notably for us, about a 45-minute chat on his time as director of football with Plymouth Argyle. He then went on to be in the studio at Sky Sports yesterday alongside David Prutton, Michael Brown and Curtis Davis. Has anybody watched the 45 minutes before I come to one of you for questions, or do we all know what was said, or am I going to be doing this on my own?
I've seen the couple of bits, the slightly more preposterous statements that have been clipped up, but I've not actually yet watched the whole thing, though.
I think I'm in a very similar boat.
Excellent. Well, let's just talk about those clips then, because those are probably the bits that we want to talk about. There was let's not make Neil Dewsnip out to be a massive villain in this interview. There was plenty of positive stuff he said about Plymouth Argyle, and obviously I was at the game yesterday, so I didn't see it on Sky Sports Boyle account. He was very positive about the club and shared a lovely moment in Miron's post-match interview, asking whether or not we were going to do the impossible. Sam, the comments about Wayne Rooney's appointment and things like that. I mean, was it necessary for Dewsnip to go into such detail that makes people look a little bit silly if this is the case, or are we, as a fan base, are we reading too much into what Neil Dewsnip said in the interview, or what's going on here?
I think there's 2 things you've got to be aware of here, maybe 3 things. The first is that this interview came out almost exactly to the day 3 months since his departure from Argyle was confirmed. Logically, my mind might say that's the end of some kind of NDA period or period of silence or whatever, but it came out exactly 3 months to the day. So logically, to me, that indicates that maybe this has been in the can a little while. And the second is that Neil, and again, I will do my standard thing that I've not done for about 3 months and mention the fact that I did meet Neil Dewsnip in Spain. Neil, bless him, as much as he is a very entertaining guy and is very engaging, I do feel has an issue that perhaps I also have, is that he can't resist running his mouth off. And I think that was pretty much on evidence there. And I think and possibly the third thing is that I do think he wants, picking up on a couple of things he said, I do think he is possibly looking to get back into football, maybe one more job as a sporting director somewhere, maybe a big, League One, League Two club, trying to take them up like he did with Argyle. I do think that he wants to present himself in the best possible light. And I do feel that he was maybe trying to distance himself a little bit from the Rooney decision, saying about how Simon was so impressed by this, Simon was so impressed by that. The slightly daft anecdote about the tea lady and Rooney knowing all the names of the staff at Derby. Look it up if you've not heard it. I can't really do it justice, but basically he said that Rooney got the job largely because Hallett was impressed by Rooney's attention to detail and knowing so many names of all the staff. So I think what he's probably done there is he's maybe taken something that did happen and maybe took it a bit out of proportion to indicate that was like, the biggest or only reason why Rooney got the job, when in reality it probably wasn't. I think he's very much tried to put himself in the best possible light. But what I would say is we are picking out 1 or 2 bits where he said stuff that's a little bit spicy. From what I gather, again, I've not heard it all, but from what I gather, the majority of it, he was quite praiseful and quite happy about his time at Argyle. And certainly when he was on Sky yesterday, from what I've seen what he said on that, and I've seen his his nice little moment with Miron in the interview. I think Miron looked a little bit surprised that Neil was asking him a question, and he, for one, closest thing I've ever seen to Miron being a bit flustered, and he sort of said, "Well, I hope so, my friend," is what he said. But I think he does clearly retain a lot of affection for Argyle Juicelip from that, and I think Richard in the comments has come up with the perfect thing of, you get the feeling everyone's trying to blame each other for the Rooney appointment, and I think there is a bit of that going on for sure. But yeah, ultimately, I think you take it with a bit of a pinch of salt. I think Neil is trying to present himself in the best possible light, and perhaps that's perhaps in doing so he's maybe blowing certain stories out of proportion. But look, the way he spoke about us on Sky is a man who clearly did enjoy and hold affection for his time at Argyle, so fair play to him for that.
Yeah, I think somebody else has made the comment that there was a lot of the term "us" involved in both the podcast and, by all accounts, on yesterday's appearance on Sky Sports. And as Sam says, he was incredibly complimentary on Sky yesterday at various points. He was very complimentary about the title-winning season and the effect the Green Army can have on the football club. Of course, we all understand that it ended in pretty negative circumstances. But what I found interesting above all, I put the comment up a little bit earlier about his not lack of belief, but perhaps his surprising stance on the use of data when it comes to player recruitment and how it should be implemented and things. But I also found it interesting about his comments that after his caretaker spells, when he was asked, would he have taken the job on full time and things, and he said it wasn't for him, but then he says, sometimes I sit there and I think, what if, what would have happened if him and Nance had kept going, if you like. So that, I thought that was interesting, that he was thinking in that way, as well as obviously being disappointed that his hugely successful time at Home Park had come to an end, but also that he still holds Argyle with a lot of affection. So if you haven't seen it, go check it out. It is worth a watch. But also, if you haven't checked it out yet and you want to know more on what fans think of it, there is a thread on Passotti that has been very active since the interview came out. I think they're at 7 pages or something, with 100-odd replies, with a varying degree of views. So if you do want to check out what other people think of it, do check that one out. And as friend of the show and member of Sam's congregation, Pat says on the comments, he did defend the Argyle players when Michael Brown was essentially trying to say it was anything but Chris Wilder's fault yesterday with what went on. So that was good to see. Sam, Jack wants to know about Dan Scar's tweet. Did you want to touch on this before we go into the Easter preview, or?
Yeah, go on. I do think it is worthy of at least a quick 5 minutes, because it is so unusual. So for those of you who are not, perhaps terminally online like I am, who haven't seen the tweet, very unusual. Miron Muslic quote tweeted Argyle's tweet saying, "Just imagine," which we presumably can infer to mean "just imagine if we stay up." And then Dan Scar gives what can only be seen as quite a sarcastic reply, saying, "Well, play the players who care then. Skipper has been there and done that." Obviously in a reference to the perhaps slightly surprising choice not to start Joe Edmonds in the game after Matti Soranola's injury, instead choosing to start Mumba on the right wing back and Ogbeta left wing back. And just as a very brief segue, I think that really shows how far Puhac just fell down the order, that even with Edwards being controversially benched, Puhac was still nowhere near, which to me just says how much of a damp squib his Argyle career has been. But anyway, that's a segue. Going back to that, obviously that was quite a very, very, I would say, surprising tweet to see. I quote tweeted it saying, well, whilst I don't necessarily disagree with him, that was a pretty surprising intervention, because quite simply based around the fact that you very rarely see a active professional of another club calling out or criticizing the head coach or manager of their previous club, particularly when, if this was somebody who left 10, 12 years ago, that would be another matter, in the sense that then players can essentially act as a pundit. But a player who's left a not even a year ago, 8 months ago, now criticising the new head coach of the club is very unusual, and it does sort of chime with, again, there's a couple of references to it in the comments, that there's been a vague little bit of speculation doing the rounds on Twitter, WhatsApp, social media, of that there's been a bit of tension, a bit of a disagreement between some of the old leadership group and perhaps Muslic and the new guard. Again, I'm not going to go into all the kind of scuttlebutt and the rumours of all of it, just because, for one, I don't know how much of it is true, how much of it isn't true. And obviously for two, I think, if that some bits are best kept behind closed doors, certainly for the time being. I do think there is absolutely some level of tension there, because that has got to be a complaint from Scar that he's heard from Edwards and from some of the pros, that he's maybe not been playing enough, possibly even some disagreements about the style of play appears to be the other thing that's doing the rounds. What I would say is, I don't think this is the same scenario as Foster, where Foster has completely alienated the senior leadership group out of maybe his own kind of insecurity or his own desire to rule with an iron fist. I don't think that's necessarily what's going on, because I think with Foster, the players are pretty much down tools by the end. With Miron, you can absolutely, blooming well see they're still playing for him, because you wouldn't have had that incredible last 20 minutes if they weren't. So I think Miron is certainly, 10 times more respected than Foster was. But I do think that there maybe is something to these sort of social media rumours that are doing the rounds based on the Scar tweet. That's not a thing you tweet without there already having been some discussion or some discourse about it. It's kind of the way I view that. And you know what? I think people do have different ways of how to achieve the best outcomes, and you will. I think Dan, if you don't mind me quoting you, said in the podcast chat, it's very normal in the workplace for people who have disagreements have their own views on how something should be done. And naturally, I suppose, extending that to the football sphere, if you do have disagreements in that football sphere, that after a bad loss like we had at Swansea, that could spill over into maybe venting to your mates, venting in a group chat, etc. And yes, as my dad, friend of the pod, said, if you watch Benchcam, there's plenty of togetherness. And for me, one of the really inspiring moments of that was Beidou hugging Muslic and jumping up and down, celebrating when he's had such a rough few weeks himself. Great stuff. But I do think that there may be, at the same time, some truth in this idea that there's been a bit of a disagreement, that the stalwart, as Ross says in the comment, Rosa says, not Ross, my apologies, as Rosa says in the comments, the stalwart players who've played together for years have been frozen out. And I think that may be causing some level of, disconsternation, if that's the right word. So I don't know about that. I think Miron has said that Joe will get the chance to start on Friday. Good. And I think maybe if there is some disagreement, I think maybe I like it. I certainly I don't think it's like Foster necessarily. I don't think it's irreparable, because if it was irreparable, we wouldn't have had that togetherness we showed yesterday. But I do think there's maybe room for a bit of compromise on both sides, because as much as Miron does like to play a certain way, I do think the old guard, if anyone's going to single-handedly drag us over the line, it's the old guard. It's Edwards, it's Hardy, Mumba even. So I do think that's worthy of consideration. And hopefully Miron will have seen what a lift Joe gave everybody, will have seen how much better we were in the second half, and we'll pick Joe on Good Friday, and hopefully we'll go to Middlesbrough and get the win. But I just feel it's worth mentioning, because obviously the tweet, by the way, has now been deleted. So perhaps that's again been a case that somebody sort of said to him, "Oi, delete that, you daft," whatever. And he's done so. But thought it was worth pointing out and worth mentioning. It was a very unusual intervention.
I hope I'm not going to start on Friday. I'm not sure I've got 90 minutes in me. I do hope you're referring to our fantastic captain. Let's rattle through a quick preview then, because I am mindful we've been going now for 140 minutes, an hour and 14 minutes. Dan, why don't you kick us off with Middlesbrough away? We won't make this a massive in-depth preview, because obviously, we've got 2 games over the weekend. There's plenty of water to go under the bridge between now and the time the team, I guess, fly to the northeast ahead of the weekend's game. What do you think about this one? Because Borough have hit their wall, haven't they? Their now annual wall that every time they get near the playoffs towards the end of the season, that they sort of give up now at this point, and results tail away. However, with two former Plymouth Argyle stars in that team, in Finn Azaz and none other than Morgan Whittaker, there's still going to be plenty of incentive from those two at least to get a positive result in this one on Friday, isn't there?
It is. It's been a strange one for them because quite a while ago I saw they were on that bad run of form, kind of coinciding when Whittaker joined, funnily enough. And they seem to be slipping away from the playoffs, and then all of a sudden they were back in them again. I see they're now slipped to 8th, so they're still kind of on the fringes of it, but desperately need a win. Another one of those games where a point doesn't do either team too much good. Yeah, I worry that the footballing gods are kind of brewing up a script that perhaps involves the words Whittaker apostrophe 89 or something like that to break our hearts. But yeah, hopefully it's going to be a tough game, without a shadow of a doubt. The game there last season where we won 2-0 and widely described as a fantastic performance is a bit of a freak one, to be honest, because I think we played pretty well, but Middlesbrough on that day in history were honking. I expect they'll be a lot better on Friday. We're going to have to look out for Whittaker. Obviously, we know how good he is or can be on his day. Consistency is an issue with him, and hopefully, we do get him on an off day. Whether he starts or not, I think he started the last game, but has been benched quite a few times recently. And Azaz as well, just full of quality. I see their fans have been giving him a bit of stick, which surprises me somewhat because his numbers are exceptional in this division. And his quality we know about very, very well. So those are the obvious two we've got to keep quiet, but they do have a lot of quality in their squad. Is Carrick getting the absolute most out of it? Is potentially an argument that could be said, maybe not. So it's going to be very, very tough, but it's a tricky one in that we've got to go there. We've got to win. We've got to go there for the win. You know, we can't just go there and think we'll just shut up shop and settle for a point. At the same time, I do think we do need to try and keep it pretty tight first half, as we did against Sheffield United up until they scored. You know, we're just trying to keep it quite dull and quite tight, and then go from there. I'm trying not to look at the comment on screen. Yeah, going from there, you know, and just try and stay in the game and then nick something because yeah, it's a must win. But it will be a tough one for us. But you never know. You know, it's just infuriating. This team, the results have been infuriating in that we've plucked those wins out of nowhere and then followed it up with a kind of crushing defeat like at Swansea. We can't have any more of those performances. We've got to go and get probably 3 wins out of 4, maybe even 3 wins in a draw, if we want to stay up. And we need to be right on it from the first whistle. It was quite clear at Swansea we were not on it from minute 1. We've got to be on it from minute 1 at Middlesbrough.
I don't think he's going to say the words. Adam,
No,
Adam, are we getting one of your brilliant previews before this game on Friday, given it's the Easter period?
We certainly are now. You've lavished it with that praise. Yeah, no, that's in the works, and hopefully, I mean, my family won't love hearing it, but I'm hoping to get one written for the Easter Monday one as well over that weekend. So if any of my congregation are watching, then be aware of that one. But yeah,
just very quickly then, Adam, without divulging everything that's going to be in that preview. Obviously, we know, as Dan's alluded to, we know of Finn Azaz and Morgan Whittaker. We also know that Middlesbrough have a number of threats across the field in various different positions that perhaps it's not just clicking for them at the moment. We talk about Chris Wilder being under pressure. This is an almighty Easter period for Michael Carrick in his time at Middlesbrough, isn't it?
Do you know, I've got echoes actually of the whole City squad last season, which to a man and to an individual looked like an absolute playoff certainty. And there was this idea that Liam Rosenior in not finishing in the playoffs with that team had failed, and he probably had, to be fair. But his career has gone on leaps and bounds since then, and Hull City have gone in the opposite direction. So I think that's probably where the comparisons ends, because I think most managers should be getting this Middlesbrough squad into the playoffs at the very least. The talent that's going through their ranks is remarkable. I think the fact that this is a team where they have Kelechi Iheanacho in the Championship, and he's not even close to being a certain starter. It just demonstrates the depth that is in this squad, and the sort of players that could be thrown at us. I mean, Azaz obviously is one, and I believe I'm still right in saying that he's the only player in the league to have hit double figures for goals and assists this season. Shows the impact, obviously, that he can have. So yeah, they've signed a right winger in the window as well, who I know has been mentioned. I don't think he scored yet, but who knows? There's I think looking through their team, I think Hayden Hackney's excellent in central midfield. I think he's the sort of player who can offer something at both ends. And the comment on screen actually is the next one's going to Samuel Lilling Jr. Has come in and as a fullback, but very much an attacking fullback, and he linking up with whoever plays on that side is going to give whoever plays in our wing back positions a lot to think about. And if it is Joe Edwards getting the start, hey, I don't mind it, absolutely. But whether he is fit enough to keep those players quiet for the full 90, I guess we'll find out. But yeah, there's a lot to like about Middlesbrough individually and what they can offer, man for man. Have they been getting the most out of that squad this season? No, they haven't really. They should be top 6 at minimum, probably top 3. In truth, when you look at the talent that they've got in their ranks, and to sit 8th at this stage, to come into this on the back of 2-1-0s, that can go either way. Obviously, it can either be a case of they collapse under the pressure, like a certain manager we encountered this weekend, or they can be reignited by that and try and get that push back on track. There's only one way to find out, but I'm looking forward to seeing it. And actually, I think it's going to be interesting to see how we line up as well, particularly given what we've already spoken about, the Tajani question, the Edwards question, both of which I think will be answered by Edwards starting and Tajani coming off the bench. I do also imagine that any Middlesbrough fan who's watched Plymouth Argyle over the last 2 years just assumes that Darko JB is the second coming of Pele at this stage. He seems to only play well against them. He's got his only goal against them. He had a magnificent performance at the Riverside last time. So I'm not necessarily against giving him a chance here just to see what he can do. Maybe off the bench again, maybe to have a similar cameo, perhaps for a little bit longer than he did yesterday. But hey, we've got options. They've got obviously more options, but I think there's enough about us in the way that we play and the way that they do that it could suit us if we are on song from minute 1, which of course in Swansea we're very much not. So let's see. It's one of those games where it could go either way, which I recognise is not helpful to anybody. But let's see.
Quick thought on this, because we know that for whatever reason, all of the last 3 Argyle managers just cannot resist starting Darko JB. Whatever happens, he can't spend more than 2 games in a row on the bench secretly. So we can't drop Randall and Houghton to GM. We know that they're the best combination together. We're going to go Bundu central striker with Tajani off the bench and obviously Hardy outright. That other slot has generally been rotated between Callum Wright and Obafemi. So superintendents just said it on the screen. Play and Ollie as well in the comment beneath that. Play JB as a 10. Play them in the front 3. Hardy, Bundu, JB. Yeah, height and pace up top to break the lines. I think that's just what I was going to say. I don't hate it. JB as a 10 has generally been better than JB as a central midfielder. Am I saying I definitely do that? No, I still think there's an argument that, Obafemi with his burst of pace on the counter could also be really handy. But JB's got a bit of pace about him as well, to be fair. And I wonder if what Dan was saying, that part of the reason why we were so down on Paulson was because he was playing out of position as a right back. Maybe to an extent, JB is because we're playing him out of position in CM when he's really a 10. Could we do worse than playing JB in that front 3? Put it this way, if we're going to have to play him, I think we could all agree we definitely rather play him there than in CM for sure. So I wouldn't be against that.
And as we always allude to in conversations like this, Darko JB's best game for Plymouth Argyle came at Middlesbrough last year when he played in a more attacking midfield position? It didn't come as a central midfielder or a central defensive midfielder.
In the league, yeah.
Well, maybe. Let's get some scores. We'll go left to right. Dan, you can kick us off. What's the score going to be on Friday? And then I'll ask you a secondary question, just a line or two. It doesn't have to be an in-depth answer. What then is the atmosphere going to be like on Monday for the visit of Frank Lampard's Coventry City?
Well, I'm sure the atmosphere will be, absolutely incredible, and Home Park will be rocking. No, but seriously, I think the Middlesbrough result will be. I can't shake it. I feel so negative saying this, but I can't shake that we're going to get our hearts broken with a kind of a gutsy performance, but a 2-1 defeat, unfortunately, which would then lead to probably a kind of similar scenario in the Cov game where it will feel a bit flat, but we might pull a result out and just kind of be just about still in touch as well with 2 games to go. That's what I'll go for.
Sam?
I've consistently, for a very long time, earmarked this one as the kind of profile of game that we get points from. Middlesbrough, soft underbelly, they overplay, they're not getting the best out of their resources. I think we'll get them on the counter with a couple of goals, and I think we'll keep up our 100% record at the Riverside, and I think we're going to win 2-1.
And the atmosphere on Monday is going to be?
Well, if we win 2-1, it will be electric, because then it really will be on.
Vic Paulson's on fire and he's playing Hackney off the park, springs to mind with that comment. Adam, same question. Score for Friday and atmosphere for Monday.
And the things I do for that comment on screen to be true, and last minute Victor Paulson winner, do not bear thinking about. Unfortunately, I am going to come down on the negative side here. I don't think we'll be battered, which I know is a dangerous thing to say about Plymouth Argyle this season, and a battering's never been too far away. But I do kind of lean, I think, into Dan's camp that it'll just be one of those games that's close and they edge us out. So I'll go 2-1. Which won't help the atmosphere on Monday, but then we'll probably win again as well. And I have exactly this conversation in the lead up to Preston, where somehow we're still in the fight.
I'm going to be the positive one. Whereas along with Sam, I'm gonna join Sam on this little wagon. I think we might be able to go to Middlesbrough and get a result. There was something about the celebrations at full time yesterday. I know that Chris Wilder took exception to something he didn't even see. But there was a reserved nature about some of the more senior players in the squad and their celebrations at full time yesterday. I think back to that video of Miron Muslic shouting Joe Edwards over, and then before he walks around to the Denport end. Edwards wasn't his usual bubbly self at full time, and I think that was him perhaps reflecting on how cheesed off he wasn't starting, but also that he represents that this job isn't done. And it does mean absolutely diddly if we go to Middlesbrough and do exactly what we've done in recent weeks when we've had an opportunity like this. So I think we're going to see a totally different Argyle again on the road on Friday. I actually think we might be able to grind a win out here. And I'm actually going to say we're going to grind out a 1-0 win. I'm not going to be as bold to say that it's going to be Victor Paulson in the 92nd minute. And then Monday, Home Park is going to be absolutely jumping. I hope to God the weather is beautiful for the game. I do think that Frank Lampard's Coventry are going to walk into a bit of a cauldron on Monday. Maybe that's just a bit of misplaced positivity, but we will find out on Friday afternoon. So that brings an end to the Middlesbrough preview. We won't be live on Saturday night after the Middlesbrough game, so you will get a double header edition of the podcast on Tuesday night, the week after next. We will be live. I've absolutely no idea who'll be joining me, but I believe that I am in charge of that one as well. Sam, you're likely to be in situ anyway.
Yeah. If it's a really big talking point game on Monday, we could in theory do a phone in, I guess. But yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, if something incredible happens, then trust me, you will find us live streaming. As you already know, we are always quick on the pulse when it needs to be. But we will be, at the moment, the loose plan is we will be with you on Tuesday night. Right, we have hit the 90-minute mark. We are going into stoppage time. Once again, Oliver Langford has not shown the appropriate minute, so we are going to rattle through these questions. Before we go any further, Richard Sloman, very tongue-in-cheek, has said special guest Chris Wilder for the next one. I'm not sure Chris Wilder will be getting a My Argyle Life, but if you haven't seen it yet or not, do check out our latest episode of My Argyle Life. Sam and Aaron were joined by the one and only David Frio for a captivating hour-long episode. It really is absolutely brilliant to see the passion and the energy that David still has for Argyle. It's a shame he didn't make it over, or he did make it over, but it's a shame there wasn't a game to see when we were due to play Oxford back in December. But fingers crossed at some point in the new year, in the new season even, Argyle can bring David over and he can get his moment on the pitch once again in front of the Argyle fans. I think that would be a pretty special event. But do catch the latest My Argyle Life. It is brilliant. We do have a number of those already penciled in for the rest of this season and into the summer. Some very exciting episodes as well. I know, Sam, you and Aaron are excited about what's coming in the My Argyle Live series, so there is plenty more in store with that. Let's rattle through some questions then. I have to say, I've just scanned through them as I was talking. A number of them are all on the same topic, so hopefully we won't be dilly-dallying too much. Harold asks, what did Wilder say to our players? We don't know, and we probably never will know. I think he was probably just going on about, are you sure that's wise, and pointed towards the away end, and it all got a little bit heated. Sam Neil says, surely we have to throw everything at Middlesbrough on Friday. We can't throw in another shocker on the road, can we? I know this is a trip you're going to, but surely not.
Look, I think if we do, narrowly lose, or even if we draw whilst going for the win, whilst that will be a pretty damning prospect for our chance of survival, at least I will respect the fact we've played to an admirable level. If we go there and do like we did at Swansea and just, are 2-0 down inside the first 25 minutes and play terribly, then I'll be absolutely livid, because we cannot continue to be so up and down. We've got to give our absolute everything. We've got to leave absolutely everything out there, battle hard, and just do all we can to get the win. And if we go down playing to our best level, I'll say, you know what, fair enough. And let's just start looking forward to League One. But we can't just choke it again like we have done. We absolutely can't do it.
No, absolutely not. Adam, don't know whether you've got your finger on the pulse on this one or not, but I'm going to throw it your way anyway. Kieran asks, bit of a random one anyway. Do we know where the sports therapist is off to? It would appear there's some stories going around on Instagram and social media that our sports therapist is this one of the chaps who was issued a touchline ban after the Cardiff game? Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, Abner, the Brazilian chap, he's been at Argyle for about 10, 12 years, and he's off to pastures new Premier League, I believe.
Yeah, I think he's going to be forming part of Miron Muslic's coaching staff at Manchester City next season, and that's the rumour. No, I've got no idea.
Possibly another club in the same city might be more near the mark.
Gosh, I don't know why you'd even want to put yourself through that. Anyway, Dan, what's happened to Boateng?
Well, let me check where Hiram Boateng is now, but I know he had a good loan spell with us, didn't he, in League Two? But I'm not sure. I don't know what's happened to Maliki Boateng. Given the chat we've had around JB potentially being deployed as a number 10 and Roberts not seemingly getting a look in, we're going to need Boateng at some point. We can't rely on two centre mids to see us through the rest of the season for 90 minutes at a time. So hopefully he can be back involved again. He's shown flashes of quality. At Man City, I thought we had a decent game, and hopefully we can see some more of him, because we need some more options in centre mid, without a shadow of a doubt.
Was he on the bench yesterday?
Don't think he was he?
So, yeah, That's kind of crazy. Like I did. To be honest, I don't know if any if the person asking that watched our dancings have gone large screen all of a sudden.
My mistake. Carry on.
Yeah, I did the 2 or 3 minute ramble on this in the Swansea pod that it's kind of mad that we signed him for a very large 6-figure sum on deadline day, and now even with about 3 or 4 players now injured, he's still not making a 20-man squad, which is a bizarre situation. You kind of get it a little bit more with Al Hajj, just because at least whatever you think of the merits of that decision, you could say he wasn't Muslic's player. Boateng has been brought in for the very specific purpose of suiting and fitting a Muslic style, and even then he's still not still not even getting on the bench. So goodness knows what's happening. Maybe it's fitness, maybe it's needing a bit more time to tactically adapt. Seeing a comment that the sports therapist who's departing is in fact Italian, not Brazilian. Don't know where I got that from, but fair enough. Hold my hands up to that one. But yes, yeah, odd one with Boateng. I said it on the other night. I'll say it again now. Goodness knows what's going on there.
He was on the bench yesterday, and I think that's probably where my big surprise at when JB was the one. Hey, sorry.
Fact check twice in one answer. That's not very well.
I know it's amazing, Sam, isn't it? We all have off days. Yeah, I think that's probably why I was even more surprised that it was JB who got the call to come on than Boateng. I just thought in that situation we were obviously going to try and fill the midfield, but Muslic got his substitutions pretty much spot on yesterday. I don't think we can have any complaints about that. Sam, this is definitely one that is aimed at you, I would imagine, from Rory Drake. Can't be many sides in the Championship who haven't beaten us at all over the last 2 seasons, looking ahead to Friday.
Well, technicality this, Watford haven't beaten us in the Championship because it was 2 draws this season and 2 draws last season. But they are a Championship side who have beaten us because they played us in the League Cup and beat us in that competition. So on a technicality, I think it is only Middlesbrough of the teams who've been with us both for the years, because Rotherham, we did the double over last year and they went down. Pompey only come up this year and we done the double over them. So yeah, I think of the teams we've actually been in for both the 2 seasons, it is only Middlesbrough so far, and obviously we'll have to see if that record continues into Friday or not.
Luton as well this season.
Yes, Luton as well, of course. Again, also only with us for 1 season, but you are quite right, Luton as well this season. Yep.
Last but not least, then, because I say I'm wary of the time. We've all got things to do. I've got half a round of golf to watch. Any one of you can. Well, I think all 3 of you can take this. Really, there's 2 questions to go. One I'm going to bring you, and one that Eli PAFC has asked on YouTube. Do you think Argyle will provide a performance against all the top 6 sides that we face between now and the end of the season? What are we thinking?
Well, we have to. There's no 2 ways about it. I trust us at home. I trust that we'll have a strong game against those teams that are pushing for promotion at home, because we often do. I just every now and then find myself getting horrible memories of the trip to Ellen Road earlier in the campaign where we didn't have a shot. And so it's not always a perfect science, but yeah, I think there's some merit to the fact that we do seem to save our best performances for when the big clubs or the playoff chasing or title chasing clubs come to down. So every chance we can do that again.
Sam, Dan, anything to ask? Anything to add? Sorry.
I just think, yeah, we've got to get 3 wins out of 4 at least. I mean, I was kind of working out the permutation, thinking maybe if we get 2 wins, 2 draws, could that be enough? And you know what? I think it might be, but I think that there's going to be at least 3 teams that get to 48 points, which means with our goal difference, we need 49 to come above all 3 of them. So yeah, I think we need 3 wins. I'd love to be wrong and a couple of teams just go on a dreadful losing run, but I think we're going to need 49. We may even need 50, in which case it would be 3 wins and a draw. So do I still think it's likely to happen? Absolutely not. I still think we've left ourselves requiring a bit of a miracle, but we've got a better chance now than we did 24 hours. Well, not 24 hours ago. We've got a better chance now than we did 48 hours ago for sure.
Sam's read my mind, because my final question of the night, just a percentage answer, lads. That's all we need. What is now the percentage chance we have of staying in the Championship? Dan?
Oh, I think it's still about 5%. I can't really go more than that.
Yeah,
Sam?
Exactly the figure I was about to say, 5%.
Adam?
I'm going to push us up, bit of bravado, and say 7%.
I was expecting a lot more than that. Again, I don't know whether it's just I had a bang to the head overnight or something. I actually think it's around a 20% chance. I think with how we're looking, particularly our last two home games, Leeds on the final day has any sort of connotations around it. And let's not forget, we're going to be going to a Preston side that will have absolutely nothing to play for. We're going to a Middlesbrough side who have to win, therefore that will play into our hands that they won't be sitting back at any point during the game. Same with Coventry on Bank Holiday Monday, and funny things happen around a Bank Holiday weekend. So who knows, but I'm going to stick it at 20%. Rory in the comments says 30, so he's even more positive than I. That's it, gents, unless there's anything else you need or want to raise. We've been going now for an hour and 40 minutes. I think that's long enough of people's Sunday evening. Just a reminder, if you are just watching, you can catch the episode back in full on YouTube once we are finished in a moment. And do catch that latest My Argyle Life with David Frio joining Sam and Aaron that was released on Tuesday. It is very much worth a watch. Looking ahead towards the week, Adam will have a preview out on social media later in the week for the Middlesbrough game, and he's already promised us one for the Coventry game. Not trying to put him on the spot there. So look forward to them. We will be back on Tuesday night for a double-header edition of the Green and White podcast here for the evening. Thank you very much to all the comments, to the 1,250 of you who've given up your time on this Sunday night to join us. We do appreciate every ounce of the support. Dan, Sam, Adam, thank you very much. I've been Joe. That's been the Green and White podcast, and we will see you on Tuesday night. Go on, Argyle!